So at this point, I get to welcome Ron Blue to our annual meeting. And Ron Blue has an introduction for an organization called Kingdom Advisors that I'm going to take and to help you introduce who he is. Ron is widely considered the father of Christian financial planning, or that's what it says. And he is the founder or co-founder of a number of organizations: the Ronald Blue Trust, the National Christian Foundation, Kingdom Advisors, which we work with a lot, and the Ron Blue Institute for Financial Planning. Ron is also the author of more than 20 books and has served on the board of numerous organizations. Ron and his wife Judy have been married for 55 years. Great accomplishment, and have 5 children. I have 5 children as well. So, and 13 grandchildren. I don't have any grandchildren, but I'm sure you enjoy each one of them. And they live in Bloomington, Indiana. 2 of Ron's most recent books are Never Enough, 3 Keys to Financial Contentment, and Master Your Money, a step-by-step plan for experiencing financial contentment. And we will have several copies to give away as door prizes at the end of our meeting. So Ron, thank you so much for joining us at our 70th anniversary annual general meeting.
Well, I'm delighted, John. I bet that my 5 kids are older than your 5 kids.
Yeah, a little bit for sure.
And actually, Judy and I have been married 57 years.
Oh, there you go.
And we even now have 2 great grandsons. So we're at a stage in life that you have to live a long time to get to.
Yeah, truly blessed for sure.
Yes.
For sure. So at Christian Credit Union, we talked a lot about our members and how we're trying to apply these biblical principles. And during this past year, we clarified our purpose statement or the why of our organization, because we get the question sometimes, why do we need a Christian credit union? And we believe that when people apply these biblical stewardship principles to their handling of money and possessions, it actually changes lives. It changes lives by reducing stress in relationships and by freeing people to focus on glorifying God and loving their neighbor. So I guess my question to you would be, would you agree there's still a need for a Christian credit union, a credit union that encourages its members to apply biblical principles to the way they handle money and possessions?
You know, John, I think that if you look at the whole financial services world, and you look at banking, for example, which we're all used to, banking has changed so much in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And it used to be that the lenders were the ones that gave good financial advice. But the economics changed, and banks don't necessarily are not necessarily, and I would probably say even rarely, the source of good financial thinking. So to have a credit union which is owned by its members, and you're looking to serve your membership and to build it on a biblical wisdom and build it on the idea that if you apply biblical financial wisdom to your financial life, you're going to live less worrisome and with less stress. So I think credit unions in general are significant, and then you add a Christian credit union that can make the right decisions on people's borrowing uh, for their benefit is really significant. So yeah, I believe this friend of mine used to say, "May your tribe increase." I believe in it very much so.
Wow. Wow. No, well, appreciate it. Yeah, it is a challenge and a privilege. And in the financial services market, it has changed a lot over the last while. Um, you know, there's a lot of confusion around money and money management today. And some say this problem is universal. When we were talking earlier, you had a story about a time you went out to Africa. I'd be curious to hear. It'd be great for you to share that story with our members, because I think it would help them understand that this is something that isn't just, well, you're from the United States. It's not just a U.S. or even just a North American problem.
No, this was a real stunner for me, John. I took a group of 3 other couples, so there were 4 couples of us that went to Africa, and I did that because I wanted these other 3 couples to see the third world. and the difference in the third world and the first world. And on this trip, we were in Kenya, and we were about 4 hours outside of Nairobi, and um, visiting with a pastor. And I can still picture it in my mind, primarily because we took a picture of it. And so we were on a slight hill, and we were having tea with this pastor, and we were looking down at his one-room mud hut. And uh, he had a thatch roof, and it was kind of like you would picture. And I asked this pastor, I said, "What's the greatest barrier to the spread of the gospel in this part of the world?" And I expected him to say something like transportation or communication or finances or tribalism or something like that, but he didn't. And what he said was materialism. And that was a shock to hear that as you're looking down on this one room mud hut. And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, if a person has a mud hut, they want a stone hut. And if they have a thatch roof, they want a metal roof. And if they've got 1 acre, they want 2 acres. If they've got one cow, they want two cows." And I got it, of course, right away. But what changed, what impact it had on me was it really solidified the fact of what Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, saying you can serve either God or money, but not both. And it opened up my eyes to the fact that materialism, consumerism, was not indigenous to North America. It was indigenous to the human heart.
Yeah.
So it was going to be true every place. And basically, all behavior flows out of the heart. I spoke yesterday at a governor's prayer meeting.
Mm-hmm.
There were several hundred people there, and talked about the fact that behavior is always determined by your belief system. So, money is the most objective measurement of spirituality that there is, I think. And it's the one area of the Christian life you can't fake. Because your checkbook reveals it. And that's not a condemnation, that's almost freedom, because I now know when I'm thinking about money, I know how to think about it differently. And if I can deal with the ownership question first, everything's going to fall into place. Billy Graham said that if you get your money right, the rest of life tends to fall into place. And I think that's true. So.
Yeah, I really appreciate the story. Really appreciate the comment for sure. If you get your money right, yeah, a lot is falls into place. And yet, I don't think he was saying that if you get enough money, right, or you get too much, right. One of the questions that you often talk about that we try to apply here at Christian Credit Union is this question of how much is enough. And, really, can you talk to us about why that question is important, and maybe even give an example of someone who's been able to find contentment with their finances by answering that question? Because oftentimes anxiety that we don't have enough or that we're not taking care of leads us to a lot of poor financial decisions.
Yes, and when you answer that question, how much is enough? First of all, if you don't have a finish line, you'll never quit, and that's the big thing. So the answer is not as important as the process of thinking about that. What's going to make me content? How much do I have to be content? Is it another home? Is it a bigger home? Is it a car that I drive? The vacations I take? The clothes that I wear? What is it that I need to be content? And so the answer to the question of how much is enough is answered in the Bible. And in Hebrews 13, verse 5, it says, "Be content with what you have." So contentment is not out into the future. Contentment is right now. Right. And contentment with with what I have. So lifestyle type questions and questions that people have, you get so much peer pressure around you. So if you don't answer for yourself how much is enough, I would submit that you'll never be content. Um, you can't, and not only that, contentment is not an amount of money, it's an attitude of the heart. And we tend to equate contentment with an amount of money, and they're not related. So,
Yeah, no, absolutely, right. We need to really think, and that's where, as Christian Credit, we really hope to encourage people in that way. Uh, there's lots of ways to find that, and how much is enough, and how to find that contentment. And at Christian Credit Union, we've been actually using something from your booklet. You have a booklet called Simplifying the Money Conversation. And one of the items in Simplifying the Money Conversation is 5 habits. And we use those 5 habits as biblical principles that we encourage our members to apply. So can you talk to us about those 5 habits and discuss why they're important?
sure. I was working at a church one time, and somebody said, "You're a financial expert, aren't you?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, I suppose." And said, "Well, what advice would you give me?" And without even thinking, I said, "Well, spend less than you earn and keep doing it for a long time." That's the essence of managing money, living within your income and creating some margin. But I also was testifying before Congress a number of years ago, and I was asked by one of the senators, what would you tell the American family? And I thought of 4 things right away that I would tell them, and there are 4 out of the 5 habits. But one was live within your income. That's the first habit to learn. Secondly, avoid the use of debt because debt will always mortgage the future. And by that I mean when you borrow money, the lender is always the first one at the door to collect the money. Your pastor's probably not going to show up at your door to collect your tithe. The IRS in the United States takes a long time to catch up with you. But the lender, the Bible says that the borrower becomes the lender's slave, and that's true. However, I'm not saying that debt is the same. And I'm saying what I write in stuff that I've written on debt is that there are different kinds of debt. So mortgage debt's a lot different than credit card debt, for example. And so there are some rules to follow on taking debt. One of them is that the economic return should be greater than the economic cost. And secondly, I should have a guaranteed way to repay. Now, just to digress for a second, because what comes to mind is that a lot of people that were starting businesses would show up in my office over the years. And they would be wanting to sell me or our clients on investing in their business. And my question always was, have you been to the bank yet? And the answer most typically was, yeah, they won't lend me the money. And I said, well, there's a good reason they won't lend you the money. So because they want to get repaid. So avoiding the use of debt is one. Third is building margin into your financial life. It's been proven through research that people that have margin, a financial margin, are far more secure in their finances than those that are living hand to mouth, of course, or those that are overspending. So that's 3. Spend less than you earn, avoid the use of debt, build margin into your life. And a 4th one is to set long-term goals so that you prioritize your spending on the short term versus the long term. And frankly, the longer term the thinking on a decision, the better the decision is likely to be. But if you don't not spend it in the present, you'll never have it in the future. So that's 4th. It sounds like common sense. and it is common sense. The fifth is give generously. So if you follow those 5 principles or habits, incidentally, I believe that giving breaks the power of money, and it's the only way you can break the power is to give. And those 5 principles will never change, and they're applicable to anybody. So becoming achieving what you want financially, you have to follow those habits. So, and if you don't, it'll never work. You can't borrow your way into prosperity.
But it's kind of like you say, it is common sense, right? And yet it's biblical wisdom. And that isn't that often the case, that God's wisdom, if we just apply it to our lives, if we just humble ourselves and do that, we can get that contentment. And that's partly why Christian Credit Union, our vision is not just to apply these principles, but to be the recognized leader in applying these biblical principles. Because we hope, our hope is, even if there's credit unions that don't call themselves Christian, or banks, that they would start applying these principles, encourage people to have a better relationship, apply this kind of common sense. One of the comments that you've made with respect to these habits is this: one of these principles is give generously, and I've always been intrigued by your comment that giving generously breaks the power of money. And can you expand on that concept for our members, and just talk a little bit about what do you mean by giving breaks the power of money?
Well, if you go back to Jesus, what he said, you cannot serve God and mammon. Okay, he didn't say it's hard to serve God and mammon. He said you cannot serve God and mammon. So you have to make a choice of, are you going to serve God? If you serve God, you're going to use money to serve God. If you serve mammon, you're going to use money to serve yourself. So the only way to break that tension, if you will, is to give. And when you give, and when you give off of the top, the first fruits, then it creates in you a sense of gratitude for one thing, because the income that you have came from God. That's just true. So giving illustrates that to myself, that all that this is, all that I have, is a gift from Him. And so consequently, I can illustrate it this way. If I hold what God entrusts to me with an open hand, then He's free to put in or take out whatever He wants. And you know what? That's real freedom. But when I close my hand over what He's entrusted me with, all of a sudden it controls me, because I'm trying to protect it, if you will, and save it maybe. So the only way to break that power is to of money and accumulation is to give it. And I believe that a lot of giving should be done with cash, even without any recognition of the tax deduction that you might get from it. And when you give cash to someone, it feels different than if you put it on a credit card or write a check. And I'll digress here for another second. Churches now have gone to online giving, which I understand the reason for that and the efficiency of it. But where I used to go to church, they would say, now, if you're not a member, this was pre-pandemic, so we were meeting, we would pass the basket and say, if you're not a member, don't feel obligated to give. And then they passed the basket. Every time the basket came by me, it was empty. So I thought, well, it must be all visitors here today.
Yeah. Yeah.
But my giving changed, John, several years ago, when I realized as a financial planner, I knew basically what my income was going to be, and so I could predetermine a tithe, and I
Mhm.
could put it I divide it by 52 and give that every week online. And it's automatic to deduction. So I'd done my tithing whenever I set that program up on the computer.
Mhm.
um, and I was I was challenged by listening to a pastor talk about his own giving, and and the way that he did it was every week he would list whatever it was that the income had come in, and then write a check for 10% of that, and put that in the plate. Uh, and so Judy and I started doing that. I've got enough different sources of income, having lived as long as I have, that it's pretty rare that there's some little bit comes in every week. And so I use Quicken, and so I download all my bank accounts, and then I write down where the income came from on a 3x5 card. So maybe it was Social Security, maybe it was a dividend or something, whatever,
Mhm.
and total it up and take 10%, and I would write a check for the tithe, but I wouldn't sign it. So I would take the 3x5 card and the check to my wife for breakfast, and we would give thanks for how God had blessed us that particular week, and she signed the check. The importance of that is that all of a sudden our communication about God's provision changed, and we were
Wow.
talking about that every week, and we saw His grace demonstrated. And so now then the tithe became a sense of worship as opposed to a duty or an obligation. And it so changed everything about our thinking. Uh, and and then we had the pandemic. And so what I would do, uh, they didn't ever pass the plate, for 2 years.
Mhm.
So I would still go through the same process. I just wouldn't write a check. I would get up on my computer, the online giving. So my wife and I would look at the 3x5 card, and then she would punch the send button. That's the way we did it during the pandemic. Uh, but it breaks the power of money when you give, and it recognizes God's provision and God's faithfulness and my dependence on Him. So, and people that accumulate a lot, and you help in my business helping them give away a lot of money. A lot of people in their wealth, those that are wealthy, accumulate it and give it at death. And
Mhm.
my counsel on that is you really don't have any choice because you're leaving it anyway. So have you really given
Yeah.
it? So I believe in giving, breaking the power of money, and I've seen it work in my own life and in the lives of a lot of other people.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for that story, and thanks for reminding us that that should be an act of worship because really, like you've said many times, and that we even use the verse of Psalm 24, verse 1, and really brings through that concept of God owns it all, and are you willing to recognize that? So thank you
Mm-hmm.
so much for that. So, um, really appreciate your time with us. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our members today?
Uh, well, I just would like to share a sense of encouragement. You're in a business dealing with money, and consequently, you're dealing with lives uh, as directly as any doctor would be dealing with a life. Uh, and I believe that the checkbook reveals my belief system. And as a Christian credit union, you've got an opportunity to help people think rightly about money. And you can provide a terrific service to your members by what you do. But then you add to that the emphasis on biblical wisdom and biblical principles is unique. And so I just want to encourage your staff. Uh, may the next 70 years be very profitable for the credit union.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being part of this and being willing to do this for us as part of our 70th anniversary. And may God continue to bless you and your
All right.
work as well. Thank you.
Thank you, John. It's been a joy.